Welcome to Strictly Facts, a guide to Caribbean history and culture, hosted by me, Alexandria Miller. Strictly Facts teaches the history, politics, and activism of the Caribbean and connects these themes to contemporary music and popular culture. Wagwan Strictly Facts fam, sending all of my Jamaicans at home and abroad a very happy belated 60th Independence Day. In honor of our 60th anniversary's mission, Reigniting a Nation for Greatness, we decided to do a throwback episode swap with Carry On friends. For anyone born in the diaspora, how do you self-identify? We are still very much a part of the nation, and I'm here to say it's okay to proudly proclaim both your American-born identity as well as your Jamaican heritage. Beyond that, if you have at least one Jamaican-born grandparent, you are in fact a Jamaican citizen by descent. You just have to complete the paperwork. In our episode swap, two Jamaican citizens by descent, Ashley and Keisha, discuss their motivations and the process for obtaining their dual citizenship. And this isn't limited to Jamaicans either. If you are a person of Caribbean descent, it is a privilege to have dual citizenship. Ashley even has a YouTube page where she explains the process, which we've linked in our show notes below. We hope that after listening to this episode, you're moved to explore getting your dual citizenship because we are still out of many one people, no matter where you were born. Happy listening.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Carry On Friends, the Caribbean American podcast. I am excited to have this discussion with my not one, but two guests. And so, welcome Ashley, welcome Keisha to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Welcome, everybody.
Hi, everyone. I'm Keisha. Nice to be back. Thanks for having me, Carrie Ann.
As Keisha said, she's back on the podcast. And so I will let Ashley tell everyone a little bit about herself, and then we'll get to Keisha, and then we'll get to the topic that we're going to talk about today.
Hey, everybody. So I'm Ashley Moncrief. I'm a first-generation American, second-generation Jamaican. And I know a lot of times you kind of get the little generation thing confused, but it simply means out of me and my immediate family, which I'm the wash belly of four girls, I was the only one born in America. So my family is from St. Andrew, Jamaica. They migrated decades ago to New Jersey, lived there for a few years. And then they later migrated to South Florida in Miami, and we here in the diaspora like to call it AKA Kingston 21. And then that's when I came along and was born. I'm very much into the culture, into the roots. I'm an alumni at University of South Florida, had my degree in communications and a certificate in leadership studies. And I'm very much involved in like the Jamaican and Caribbean diaspora here in South Florida.
All right. Thank you for that, Ashley. I mean, I can't help but from your introduction, you may have something in common with Keisha, but Keisha, welcome back to the podcast. We had you on the podcast, wow, about over 2 years ago, right? And you did that opening clip for one of our more popular episode, American born, Caribbean raised. So Keisha, welcome back to the podcast. Well, go on.
Hey, everyone. It's your favorite girl. I am back. Yes, I am Keisha. I was born here, but I like to say I'm Jamaican. And then, people will be like, well, you were born here. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm American as well. So I'm just happy to be back, and let's get going, girl.
All right, all right. The reason I wanted to have this discussion because last year Ashley did a campaign, a whole video series on dual citizenship. And during the Carry On Friends focus group that I alluded to in a couple episodes ago, and we're going to give some of the readout from that, people wanted to know more about getting dual citizenship or moving back to the Caribbean. And then a couple weeks ago, Ashley was doing a giveaway for the application fee for the dual citizenship. And Keisha and I were having a separate conversation. She was following up on the focus group, and we're having a separate conversation. I'm like, oh, I know what. We're going to have this conversation on the podcast. So I want to kick it off by asking, I'll start with you, Ashley. What was the impetus? Why did you choose to go this route to first explore and then ultimately decide to have dual citizenship, getting your Jamaican passport and citizenship there?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I've always kind of been very cultural, and very rootsy, and I like to say, like as I mentioned before, my parents migrated from Jamaica into the States many decades ago, but when they migrated, they were already adult people. They already had a built-in life partner, right? They're kind of already set in their ways, and they already migrated with 3 children. And I think though I don't have that personal immigration story, I think it's different when you're migrating with, as an adult with, life partner, as opposed to if you're a child going through like the American public school system, you're kind of already set in your ways. And then you have your offspring. And then so what you're teaching them is really much all you know. So therefore, though, I was born and raised in America and obviously going through the American school system, I was raised Jamaican in a Jamaican household. And at least for my parents, when they migrated, even when they lived in New Jersey for a few years and then later came to Miami, there was always their relatives, their siblings or their cousins who were also Jamaican like them. So they're kind of already in that bubble of being Jamaican. So already having that, raised Jamaican type of vibe, I was always very cultured and very rootsy. And then it wasn't until maybe, I don't remember how old I was, but it was some few years back. I had an aunt, my mom's sisters, and I always like to give the reference of like a seed and you're planting. She gave me a seed, and that seed is going to be a euphemism of telling me, hey, you can get dual citizenship. And that was where the thought now really came into my head. And at the time, I may have, maybe looked online, looked at some information, probably through my local consulate, and just to get information. But I actually didn't plant that seed. I didn't grow it. I didn't water it. I didn't give it sunlight or anything to make it into what it was until a few years after that point when we were planning this family reunion in Jamaica the following year. And I was like, okay, when I go to Jamaica, I'm going to get it done. Because in my research, when you go through your local consulate, they still send everything back to Jamaica anyway. And of course, it was never a rush thing. So I said, whenever I go back to Jamaica again, which was at that point, my family reunion back in 2017, I was like, I'll get it done. And that's as it got closer, that's really now when I really planted that seed and started to water and grow it, meaning I gathered the information, see what was needed, make sure I travel with all my documentation, my parents' documentation, and the full 9 yard. So really, as I've always been into the culture, what really got me going was when my aunt mentioned it to me about, hey, do you know you could get dual citizenship? And then, as they say, I guess nothing happened before its time. And, years later, at that point in that initial conversation was when I actually got it done.
Wow, thank you. Keisha, what was your story? What inspired you to consider it and actually, move forward with it?
So, like Ashley, you're right, Carrie. We do have a lot in common. I am one of three, and my sisters were both born in Jamaica, and my parents came here as well. And I was born in California, went back to Jamaica, lived there for a short time, and then moved here with my mother because she was able to come here first through my grandfather filing for her. And I was the only one that could go with her because I was actually born in the United States. And then later she filed for my sisters and my dad. But I grew up in a Jamaican household. I ate Jamaican foods. We live the culture. That's what we are. So years go by, and I always have this battle of people telling me that I'm not Jamaican because I wasn't born there, right? And it's usually people who are Jamaican who were born in Jamaica. It's rarely American people, because American people are like, nah, you Jamaican, like, you know what I mean? So I got the American people saying you Jamaican, and I got the Jamaican people saying, no, 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 you're not Jamaican. You wasn't born here. Like, no, right? So it's like this tug of war. So for years, I've been fighting with this. And one day, maybe a couple years ago, I was listening to an Amanda Seals podcast, and she was so passionate about her Grenadian background. Her mom's Grenadian. And when she spoke, I was like, oh my God, that's me right there. Because she was like, I'm Grenadian. Nobody better not tell me I'm not Grenadian, blah, blah, blah. Like, so I really connected with that. And then she said, I have my citizenship. Did you know that if your parents are born in a country that you can get your citizenship? And I was like, damn, really? So that made me look into the research. And I found out that if your parents are born in Jamaica or born wherever, you can get citizenship in that country. So recently, I went and applied. I did it here because I tried to do it in Jamaica, but the process, my God, it's just crazy. And I had all types of issues with my birth certificate and my name and the spelling and the this and the that. So it just turned into a situation where I had to do all types of things to get my documents in a certain order so that I can do it properly. So I filed for it in August of this year, and I'm still waiting for everything to come back.
Ashley, did you get any pushback? Do you have a similar experience to Keisha where people telling you that you're not Jamaican or whatever the case may be?
Absolutely. There's always like this intense dialogue between, I feel like, whether you're first generation, second, third generation, or even people who were born in Jamaica but been in the States for so long. And they really tell you, like, oh, you're foreign born Pitney, or you're not really Jamaican, or then there's some, sometimes they tease you just for like, for jokes. And then sometimes I feel like there are people that are really serious, right? So I've had a combination of, both. Some people like, oh yeah, of course your roots are Jamaican, you're Jamaican. And then I've had other conversations where people like, oh, you're a Yankee, you're a foreign born Pitney, you're not Jamaican. And I always get teased about it. Again, mostly amongst Jamaican people, of course, in my family or extended family or family friends. When Keisha mentioned that, I'm like, oh yeah, definitely had that experience of people, trying to tell you, you're not Jamaican. I'm like, regardless of what you think, I am Jamaican. And ultimately, I don't necessarily needed that validation of like going through the process of citizenship, but there's nothing like it being official. And when you know within yourself of who you are, you don't worry about necessarily other people, what they're telling you. But I think a lot of maybe Jamaican Americans and extending, of course, to the Caribbean Americans have probably could answer yes to that definite question.
I don't get this argument at all. If the consulate is promoting that, then how could you not say someone is? I was born in Jamaica, and even though I can say my birth certificate is a Jamaican birth certificate, I do find that because I've lived here for 20 plus years, people will dismiss me and say, "You're not really Jamaican no more. You live a foreign so long." I'm like, "Really?" My birth certificate begs to differ. And the passport will say place of birth, Jamaica. So, I mean, we all go through these different range or scales of people trying to take the identity that you grew up with away from you. My kids, I mean, the kids grow up absorbing the culture, they eat, they dance, they do everything. So there's so many other things in life that will allow them to question their identity. And if the culture of their parents is something that they have been exposed to from birth, I think it's unfair and out of place for anyone else to kind of take that from them, right? So that's my position on it. So we get a sense that this is important to you. Didn't need the validation, but it is an opportunity that exists, that's advertised, and you take advantage of this. Now, what would you say to anyone who's never considered this as an opportunity? Why should anyone explore dual citizenship? Maybe they're like, I don't need no dual citizenship or passport to say I'm Jamaican or Trini or Bayesian. What's the benefit of having this? I'll start with you, Ashley.
Yeah, so of course, you really don't need it, the legal sense, right? The officiality of it to say that you are X, whatever Caribbean island that is. But I've always felt like there's always something different when something becomes official. I've always heard, for example, when people I've heard married couples say before when they're so quote unquote playing house, right? They have their kids, they have their unit, but they're not legally married. And I've always heard that once you do get married, something changes. No matter if you were already in that whole playing house situation, something changes once it becomes official. And so I would definitely recommend someone to just look into it. I mean, you may not feel that this may benefit you, but you never know. You're looking at here and now. You're not looking at maybe the long term, how somehow this may benefit you. For example, of course, you don't need to have it official to reconnect or connect with your roots, but that is just another step in the process to connect with your roots. And there are general benefits. I can't necessarily explain in the different Caribbean islands, but of course in Jamaica, whatever benefits citizens do have there, because once you become that Jamaican citizen, you have all the benefits thereof. And then you're kind of be able to bounce between these two, I like to say hyphenated lifestyles that we live as a Jamaican American or overall Caribbean American. There's definitely, I think, some fortune into it, And I think everybody's personal situation and story is different. Some people's why look different than my why, but I definitely would definitely encourage people, at the end of the day, to look into that secondary, culture that definitely raised you aside from that American, lifestyle.
Thanks for that. And I'm going to come to you, Keisha. So, in a future episode, not for this year, God spare our life, 2022, we are going to release an episode on investment, citizenship by investment, which is a huge program in the Caribbean, right? So, some people, if they invest in particular Caribbean countries, they could get citizenship, right? So, if they're trying to get people to be citizenship through investment, if this is an option, I would say it's worth exploring. But Keisha, we were having a discussion, and in addition to you doing this citizenship for yourself, you did it for someone else. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my daughter, she also completed her application on the same day. And I just feel like it's important to, teach your children where their grandparents are coming from, their roots, teach them about who they are. Like I have a son who's older, and I explain to him a lot of times when he's just not doing the right thing. I explain to him, listen, your grandparents are from another country. They came here for a better life, for opportunity. I think it's important for our children to understand where our parents are coming from and why they came here so that our children know that everything that they have here, don't take it for granted because your grandparents didn't have that and they sacrificed to come here so that we could have that and give that to them. So I just feel like you got to know where you're coming from to know where you're going. And I want my daughter to have that connection to her roots where she can go back to Jamaica. And when they see her passport, they don't treat her like she's some outside visitor, but more like welcome home. You know what I'm saying? Because for me, when I go to Jamaica, I feel like that's a second home to me. I just feel so at peace and seriously, like I feel like I'm home. So I just love that experience and I wanted to make it official through getting my documentation, my passport, my citizenship, all that stuff. And I want my daughter to also have that same thing.
It wasn't until our conversation that even with myself and my husband, born in Jamaica, raised in Jamaica, I didn't think of doing this for my son Ethan, who we call Ethan Ravas because everything is about dancing and ravas and ding dong and all that stuff, right? And as we were talking about it, I said he'd be super excited to have this experience, this dual citizenship or having this passport. And then I thought after we hung up, I thought of a lot of colleagues that I've had through my professional life in the law firm, outside of the law firm. As soon as that kid is born, that kid is getting an Irish passport, an Italian, a Greek. I mean, seriously, it's this thing where you think it's luxury, but they're like, nah, my grandfather, my grand this, and they maintain their passports and their kids get them and they go to travel. When I thought of it, I'm like, imagine this is our birthright. We have this opportunity. Why don't we expose, my kids to this as an option that they can explore that? Hey, they can get this, this Jamaican passport and not just say, oh, my parents are Jamaican. Here's this documentation also that supports or encourages them to be, in touch with their culture or the importance of traveling or exploring, their culture, their heritage, and just the world. So, I mean, this was the beauty of this conversation. So, Ashley, I want to come back to you. You've done this campaign. What has been the reception? And I know we're talking in the Jamaican context because I know that you're doing this, but this definitely applies to anyone of Caribbean heritage to explore dual citizenship or getting your passport for your country. There's so many things that are going on in the Caribbean. But Ashley, what has been the feedback, the reception? What have you seen? What are questions, concerns people have about dual citizenship?
Yeah, so the reception has been great. Starting from this whole campaign when I did last year, the videos of, how to get citizenship passport, even touching on the Jamaican TRN and whatnot, and then be able to pass it forward. So that was when I decided, how cool will it be? And this initiative was always important to me because I feel like a lot of second and third and et cetera generations just doesn't know that this is an option and opportunity. So I said, how cool would it be? And I wanted to pass it forward to somebody else and pay for the application fee of someone else like me who's in America but has Jamaican descent, and pay for the application fee to get that started. And so overall, the reception has been very good. A lot of people didn't know that this was a thing, that they could get citizenship through their parents, or even grandparent. And again, you just need at least one parent or grandparent to apply for citizenship, specifically by descent. But I've also noticed for people that have applied before, there were like, they had, similar to Keisha, she had issues in terms of the paperwork. And so they've even found that, even though they may have found the video late that I did last year, they found it very beneficial because I literally kind of like walk you through it. And so there is a very niche market of obviously people that are looking to connect and reconnect with their roots, because I've encountered them, I've seen them. There's even been in one Facebook group, there was a lady, and I know she was born and raised in Jamaica, and I don't know if she's living in the States or in England or Canada, and she had no idea this was a thing. And when I presented the information, she was like in awe, because she was like, oh, she's going to make sure she gets the citizenship. It was either for her daughter or granddaughter, because I think she was to inherit maybe land or property in Jamaica. And I don't know in that terminology, if someone's inheriting anything, if they would need to kind of show aligning documentation. But she was super excited, just even something like that, that this was even a possibility. So therefore, there are people who are looking to get this for their children. And even from doing the little scholarship giveaway, I had two people that I know of reached out to me, and they were like, oh, I definitely either need to apply or watch a video, because they were interested in getting it for their children. And then so overall, the reception has been great. And, as I said, you can't necessarily know people's reasoning on why, but I think people are yearning for that deeper connection. And I would even say, though, I remember talking with someone from my consulate office a few years ago during the whole Trump political climate. And I know immigration is always an issue when it comes to politics, and not to dive too deep into that, but I remember she said that citizenship applications have gone up. And I don't know if she meant citizenship by descent, or there's marriage in a couple of different ways. But people are seeing maybe just the climate that we're in America, and they're just wanting to either connect, or maybe not to necessarily say have an escape route, or but just another option available to them.
Say it for what it is. So in the episode that I did with Deshauna on rethinking the American dream, this kind of came up. It was the undertone of this because it was recorded shortly after the January 6th event. And, we have to rethink the immigration story of our parents because we're living a different life. Most of us know of people who come here and never go back to Jamaica. Whereas now we live in a very digital world, so we can go live there and work if we choose to. So it is an option to explore. So it was just something that I'm not surprised has gone up in terms of interest for people to really explore this dual citizenship as an opportunity or an option for real, for real. And again, it's not to be political, it's just factual. Some people had serious concerns about life in America in the last couple of years, and it's not necessarily it's gotten better. It's just you want to have alternative plans. And there is a market for this because the whole reason why this topic came about, and Keisha, you're aware, there was a specific discussion in our focus group. So it's not just a niche. There is a group of people who are interested. It's just that where do they go and find this information about how to do it? And that's why I wanted to do this episode. And I'll definitely link to your video in the episode show notes. Well, on the blog, because then we could embed it and people could watch it from there. But that is just such a good information put together of everything out there for YouTube. This is just something so instructional. And I'm sure if it doesn't already exist for some of the Caribbean countries, if they're available, let me know and I'll provide that as a resource as well. So I don't want to scare people about paperwork, but it is a reality of dealing with anything in the Caribbean. I just did an episode on doing genealogy research in Jamaica. So I did that research. It was exciting and everybody was now excited. But we also have to manage expectations because like you said, Ashley, this paperwork is going back to Jamaica and there are different COVID protocols. Have you any sense of how these COVID protocols are impacting how things are processed? Or if you don't know, that's fine. But I'm just kind of curious because in my mind, if there's no movement days in Jamaica or for a while there was lockdown in Trinidad, I'm not sure how our paperworks are processed, not to necessarily to discourage, but you want to manage your expectations. So if you normally would have done this in August and you would get through with it by January, it may take a little bit more time. Do you have a sense of any impact on COVID protocols on the processes?
Yeah, so on the consulate side of things, I remember even doing these videos last year. Of course, we're still in a pandemic, but during the height of it. And then there were people that reached out to me, and I even recently checked for myself just up to a few weeks ago. If you're going to your local consulate, so of course I'm checking the Miami consulate and even the New York consulate because my one of my cousins in New York was interested in getting hers as well as a first generation American. So appointments at the consulate, and I don't know if before COVID if you ever had to make an appointment or you could just walk in, but with COVID, at least on the consulate side of things, you have to make an appointment. And when you go to the consulate's website, and I've gone through the Miami one and the New York one, it's taking 2 months just to get an appointment. And so, whatever that appointment might be, whether I looked for citizenship specifically, but I think regardless, even if it's passport or so on, it's taking up to 2 months just to look on the calendar for available dates and times. So I can only imagine before it wasn't like that. So of course, every company, every business has their typical COVID protocol due to COVID, their messaging, but at least for your local consulate, it is taking up to 2 months just to get an appointment. So that is, as you said, to manage expectations. So imagine now you're interested in getting this done. It's taking you 2 months. And so you're going to want to make sure that you have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, because when you look into the paperwork, and as Keisha mentioned, she can tell you, and I've experienced many other people that has said that you're going to want to manage your expectations and make sure really you have everything on the up and up, because there is a delay. So you don't want to finally get an appointment. And a lot of times these consular appointments, they're working off Jamaica time. So when you think about America and like certain business hours, you're thinking that, okay, certain offices close 5, 6 o'clock, maybe 4. Certain offices stop taking appointments by 12 in the middle of the day, maybe 1. So if you're a working person going to school, whatever the case is, in the middle of the day, it's not really feasible. So this is really, you really definitely want to manage your expectation, because this can be, you may have to block out a day, block out hours, and you don't want to go ahead and do that knowing that it is taking a while to get the appointment, and then go there and realize, hey, all your stuff is not aligned, and are you going to have to come back? And then so with COVID, for the concert side of things, it is taking 2 months to get an appointment. In Jamaica directly, I'm not sure. I think Kingston, you can probably still walk in, but I'm not sure what it's like personally in Jamaica right now during COVID. And want to make note that it's not the same as if a Caribbean person is coming into America trying to gain residency or citizenship. And, we all probably hear of other people's immigration story. And it's very easy. When you do citizenship by descent, assuming, yes, you have all your documentation together and you really dot those I's and cross your T's and, make sure you have everything together, it literally is just an application. There is no test. There is no swearing in. There is no big hoopla, interview with an immigration officer. It literally is just processing your application, paying your fee, and giving other paperwork. And they'll let you know when it's ready. If, like for me, when I applied in Jamaica, they called. He called my uncle and said it was ready because I wasn't still there to pick it up, and he picked it up for me, and then dropped it off to me when I seen him next time. And if you go to your local consulate, they'll mail it to you. So it really is very much a simple process. Don't look at it on the other aspect of when you hear other people's immigration story trying to come to America, because this is in Jamaica's constitution. It is part of your birthright. And so I definitely think people should look into it. It is an easy process.
So before we wrap up, Keisha, last words to anyone thinking of dual citizenship who may not have considered it. Any final thoughts?
I would say do it because it's your right and you can.
Point blank. Ashley?
I'm laughing because she's like, end of discussion. as Keisha said, I definitely think you should do it. Ultimately, the choice is yours. I'm giving you the seed. And as I mentioned before, are you going to plant it? Are you going to choose to make it water and grow into something great? And as mentioned before, I said we as Caribbean Americans, we live this hyphenated lifestyle. And I want to kind of briefly mention, and tapping into a couple of years ago, I didn't know what ADOS was. Born and raised in America, did American history and government and all that stuff in school. And then I realized it's American descendant of slavery. And then you talk about when people talk about the chattel slavery in like the Black American side of socially here in America. And then it's always those things where like you're too Jamaican for your American counterparts, but then you're too American for your Jamaican counterparts. But I think in that realm of talking about being a Black person in America of Caribbean descent, or we're talking specifically Jamaican descent, you realize that hey, you cannot trace your roots to anywhere else back in America. Your roots and history really stem from somewhere else. And then so you realize like, hey, I'm American, but then in certain conversations, like I really am not American. So you want to have, I'm not saying an escape route, but just have, it's a privilege. And I do understand that it is a privilege to have, these secondary citizenships, but don't count out that culture that helped raise you, whatever that specific culture is. So definitely look into it. As I said, I'm giving you the seed. And what will you do with that seed after I've given it to you?
Man, I just love when everything comes together because the American born, Caribbean raised, that's exactly what Tracy, one of the guests, said. Like when she looked at her friends and she was based in Florida too, and she went to college, like they could trace their great great grandparents to North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, or whatever. And she's like, I have to go back to Jamaica to trace most of my roots, right? So I think that's a good point, and it's a privilege that we have, and we should use it. So I'm looking forward to having more of these conversations, and I'm looking forward to sharing the readout of the survey because I want to do more episodes that resonate with you or information that you are looking for to have a discussion. Dual citizenship, I took for granted because I'm Jamaican. The most I need to do is renew my passport, and I need to do that, right? But thinking about it from the perspective of my children, that's what Keisha did. So even if you are born in Jamaica, think of your kids, grandkids, I could think of my niece and nephew, they could get a Guyanese and a Jamaican passport. So that is such a privilege to have. Everyone, thank you again for listening. And I will make sure I post Ashley's video and connect to Keisha's podcast, Oh Hell No Podcast. And until next time, guys, walk good.
Thanks for tuning in to Strictly Facts. Visit strictlyfactspodcast.com for more information from each episode. Follow us at Strictly Facts Pod on Instagram and Facebook, and at Strictly Facts PD on Twitter.